All right, we are moving on to section 1.4. The start thinking part says it's Billy's first day working at the rental car service. He is so overwhelmed that he forgets to carefully record which customer took which car and must now piece together the details before his boss comes back. He remembered that the four customers came at 5:30, 5:45, 6, and 6:30, and he rented out the Mustang, Camaro, GLS, and X6. The driver's licenses were from Michigan, Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Help Billy figure out which car went to whom and when by using the following clues. So what I did was I labeled all these clues A, B, C, D, E, and F. And just as a disclaimer, if you struggle with this, so do I. I have a really hard time because when you have all these clues, a lot of times one clue depends on the answer to the other clue, and you got to be kind of storing that in your brain, so it can get pretty tricky. So basically, it's really hard for me to explain this since the table is already filled out, but it's already filled out since this is the key, but I'll explain how I did this. So there's certain clues that are just kind of givens. So one of them was like the customer from Michigan came at 5:45. So I went under Michigan and went to 5:45 and wrote the word yes, and then I was able to knock out all the other times in that row and in that column. Then there were some other ones, like the Mustang and GLS went to customers from the two southernmost states. So that would have been Tennessee and Kentucky, which basically made it so that I could go to the GLS and the Mustang, and I could put X's where Michigan and Indiana were, because those are not the southernmost states. So I was able to fill that out. And basically, I ran through these different hints, and I kept going through them back and forth. Because like I said, a lot of times you can't use something. For example, it says the X6 was rented before the GLS was rented. That's useful, but not until you figure out a different part of the puzzle. So number one, the answer was, how could you prove that the Mustang was rented to the customer with the Kentucky license? Well, the way you were able to do that was the Mustang was either in Tennessee or Kentucky because of clue F, and clue F is the Mustang and GLS went to customers in the two southernmost states. So now you know it is either going to be Tennessee or Kentucky. But then there's another hint that says the Mustang was rented out before the Tennessee customer. So if the Mustang was either Tennessee or Kentucky, but it was rented out before Tennessee, then it had to be Kentucky. So I was able to go in there and say that the Mustang was Kentucky. Put the yes in there, and then I put X's in all the rest of that column and all of the rest of that row. Not in the time part, but just in the part where you're deciding which vehicle it was. The next one says, prove that the GLS was rented out at 6 p.m. Hint, why is it impossible for it to be rented out at 5:30, 5:45, or 6:30? Well, it can't be 6:30 because of clue E. Clue E was just a given. It says the customer that came at 6:30 did not get the GLS. So that is considered just like a freebie. There was that. It can't be at 5:30 because the X6 was rented before it. So the GLS is at 6 o'clock. Can't be 5:45 because the GLS from the southern states, so Michigan, so the GLS is once again not from Michigan because it's not one of the southern states. So you had to use that kind of reasoning when you ran through this whole entire thing. And once again, this was a hard one. It showed that Kentucky was at 5:30, and that was the Mustang. The Camaro was Indiana at 6:30, and the GLS was Tennessee at 6 o'clock. And then the X6 was Michigan at 5:45. So you're piecing this together by using the facts that they give you and connecting the different facts and maybe running through this several times, because at first one piece of information is not helpful until you figure out a different piece of information. So whenever you're doing these, they're called Einstein puzzles. You just have to find out what the easy things were, the givens. Then you run through, and it's good to organize your information into a box like this. And then you go through over and over and say, well, now that I know this new piece of information, are any of the other hints going to be helpful? Okay, now let's go ahead and discuss why are we even doing this puzzle. We have already talked about a certain type of reasoning called inductive reasoning. And inductive reasoning was looking at patterns and special cases and trying to come up with a conjecture about like a general rule. We talked about the fact that there is definitely a use for inductive reasoning, but it has its downfalls. there's a large part of inductive reasoning that you're kind of guessing at something. We talked about what the pattern had to be in the next two numbers in the sequence, but that's not guaranteed that that was the sequence. It's just the most likely thing is that it's going to be the following two numbers due to the sequence we believe we are seeing, the pattern that we believe we're seeing. Now, this is different. Everything we do here has to do with facts that were already given to us. So we're putting together like a logical argument using facts, and we're building off of facts that we already know have to be true. So that has a different name. It's not inductive reasoning. It is deductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning uses a sequence of logical statements to prove a conclusion with 100% certainty. And the reason why is because you're basing this off of facts, and you just have that logical reasoning with a factual foundation. The only other part here was that a counterexample can disprove a conjecture. So if you can go over and find a counterexample, something that goes against what you think the conjecture was, like your final answer, then that would prove it to be incorrect. And we had talked about in class how a single counterexample can disprove something. Whereas if you're trying to prove something is true in math, you have to show it works in infinitely many cases. So let's go ahead and run through the check your understanding. It says if Sam and Davis are not full after eating pie, they're going to go to Qdoba. If they go to Qdoba, Sam will order a burrito bowl. Sam and Davis are both still hungry after eating pie. Read each statement below. Decide if the statement is a logical conclusion. So we're looking for the conclusion based on the information above. Explain how you know. So Sam and Davis had very small pieces of pie. Well, you might say, well, they're still hungry, so but this pie must, but that was not the basis of the statement above. So that's no. Just because they're hungry doesn't mean the pie slice was small. Davis will eat a taco salad. Maybe, who knows? But that is not leading as a conclusion from the statement above. Sam will go get a burrito bowl. Yes, that is what it said. If they're still hungry, they're going to Qdoba, and that Sam was going to get a burrito bowl. So that was the conclusion. And then they had Davis and Sam will get a stomach ache. Maybe, probably, who knows? But that's not guaranteed, and that is not going through with the logical reasoning that they have there. Now, the next one, the reason why they put this problem in here was to make sure you guys understood the concept of the counterexample. So it says Janice conjectured that in the visual pattern below, there would be 3n minus 1 small squares in the nth figure. So how can you disprove this? Just try to find one case where it doesn't work. So on figure number 3, if you put the 3 in for figure number 3, that is 3 times 3 minus 1, which is 9, and that is not the 10, which we got. So that is enough. You don't have to look at any others. After you've found one where it doesn't work, you don't have to find other counterexamples. Come up with your own rule. So different students did it different ways in class. I just was visually looking at it, and I could see that the thing was changing, was a square. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then there was just this extra one that was just hanging on there. So I knew we had a square that was always going to be whatever the figure number was, that squared. So 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4. So the next one would be n by n, so n squared. And then, oops, I messed this up. So right now, this is n squared plus 1. I don't know why I put minus 1. Just make sure you know that that is n squared plus 1, not minus 1. I think it was just because the previous one had a minus 1 and messed me up. So n squared plus 1, because you got that 1 that is just going to be a constant. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a look over the homework. Now, this first one says, given the true conditional statement, if a pumpkin helps others across the road, then the pumpkin is a crossing gourd. Ha ha ha. A pumpkin named Jack helped pumpkin pie across the road. Decide which statement is the logical conclusion. How do you know that? Is pumpkin pie a crossing guard? No, because pumpkin pie didn't help anybody across the road. Is Jack a crossing guard? Yes, he is, because he did help a different pumpkin across the road. So it meets the requirement to be a crossing gourd. Number 2, given conditional statement number 1, if a stalk of corn is a musician, then the stalk of corn forgets the sheet music. Conditional statement 2, if the stalk of corn forgets the sheet music, then the stalk of corn plays the song by ear. Haha, because it's a ear of corn. Write a new conditional statement based on the given statements. Well, it's kind of saying if A, then B, and if B, then C, so you can kind of connect those things. So when we connect them, it says If a stalk of corn is a musician, then the stalk of corn will play the song by ear. There's a special name for this type of reasoning and this property, but we'll talk about that later. Next one, given the true conditional statement, if an angle is acute, then the angle has a measure less than 90 degrees. A triangle has an angle ABC, and the angle ABC is acute. Decide if the statement is a logical conclusion. Explain your reasoning. So angle ABC is less than 90 degrees. That is true. And that was like the definition. It was angle ABC meets the requirement, so the conclusion is true. And then the other one is angle ABC is the smallest angle. But we don't know that because when you have that angle that is acute, there could be other acute angles in there and they might be smaller. Next one, Katie and Timothy each baked identical pizzas. Katie cut her pizza into 8 equal slices and Tim cut his into 6 slices. Read each statement below. Decide if the statement is the logical conclusion. If Katie and Tim each eat 2 pieces of pizza, then they ate the same amount. Well, that's not correct because it's 2 out of 8 versus 2 out of 6. So it's 1/4 versus 1/3. Okay, so that's not correct. If Katie eats 4 and Tim eats 3, then they eat the same amount. Yeah, because 4/8 is 3/6, which is going to be 1/2. So that's that. And then lastly, we had another one of those Einstein puzzles. In order to be able to do this Einstein puzzle, you needed to know scalene meant no sides congruent, isosceles is 2, and equilateral means all sides are congruent. Acute means all the angles are less than 90. Right means one angle of 90, and obtuse means that it has one angle that is greater than 90. So the same exact thing. It's really hard for me to explain this because I've already checked all the boxes. But when it says triangle DEF is not obtuse, I went for DEF and I went down to obtuse and I was able to put an X there because it was not obtuse. Triangle HJK is either acute or isosceles. So we have that. My guess is that we'll find out one of them is acute and then we'll know it's isosceles, or one is isosceles, so we're going to know that one's acute. The right triangle is also scalene, so you could have gone under right and gone to scalene and wrote the word yes, and then you could have knocked out the row and column with X's. The next one says triangle XYZ has 2 sides that are congruent. 2 sides being congruent means that it is isosceles. So you could have gone over to XYZ and gone to isosceles and wrote the word yes. Beyond that, now we can go back to a previous one that was not helpful, the one that says it's either acute or isosceles. Now we know that there was a different triangle that's isosceles, so now we know that triangle HJK is acute. So you could go to HJK and you go to acute and you can put yes, and then you can knock out that row and column for the acute right and obtuse. And once you had that, there may be 1 or 2 other things. It's hard, like I said, it's hard for me to remember what boxes still would be left undone, but I believe that we have gone over and covered this. So anyways, you can see how I filled out my boxes. It's going to be DEF is right and scalene, HJK is acute and equilateral, and XYZ is obtuse and isosceles. All right, hopefully this made sense. This is deductive reasoning. We're using, we're deducing information. We're going over and getting information that we know is true, and we're using that to come up with a logical argument to have a I forget what they call airtight, 100% correct conclusion at the end. All right, hopefully this made sense, the difference between inductive and deductive. Thanks for watching.